Hare Krishna, dear viewers, we are in 2021 and I'm answering some questions that I received from viewers about what happened to me when I actually got COVID. And I'm here recovered or recovering for the most part. And we've got a whole bunch of questions that we thought you'd be interested in hearing the answers to. So let me start off with number one. Last year was a fearful year for the whole world, with the virus gaining larger and larger part in our lives. We listened to your first coronavirus video that had the basic message that this situation will pass and that I prepare to avoid getting sick. How did I prepare? What changes did I make in my lifestyle with this impending threat in the air? Well, you know, I was in India originally when virus really broke out, or at least broke out in the news as well. So January, February, I was there. And in March, for a couple of weeks, we were just sort of toying with the idea, shouldn't I? Should I come back? Should I stay there? And ultimately I came back. I came back to Hungary, more or less just in time, because flights were stopping. And once I got to Hungary, then I came immediately from the airport to Krishna Valley. And I stayed there. I've been in Krishna Valley, or I was in Krishna Valley for 9 months. Right now I happen to be in Budapest Temple. And there's no sirens in the background in Krishna Valley. And in November, I contacted the virus in the beginning of November, and that's now exactly 2 months ago to the day, actually till today. But I really took precautions. If you haven't been there, you can Google it. You can Google Krishna Valley. It's really remote. It's in a remote part of Hungary. As it is, the property is really expansive, and the house in which I stay in is 100 yards from the next house. It's not exactly like my neighbor next door is just a couple of feet away. So we were well socially distanced. Aside from that, the community there had made the arrangement that I just sort of had my own little team, and they didn't interact with anybody else, and I didn't interact with them. So that was, that looked like it was going to be a pretty good arrangement. But best laid plans of mice and men and Hare Krishna devotees. So in one sense I thought, well, this is going to be inevitable, that it will come sooner or later, especially since Krishna Valley was very much still open and very much a visited place, because Hungarians couldn't really travel across borders, so sort of visitors increased. But aside from that, it was very good. It was very good for my lifestyle. It kept me in one place. I have never been in one place for 9 months in the last 50 years. I've never been in one place for 9 weeks, or maybe even less for that long period of time. So that was great. Life was very regulated, regulation was good. I interacted very little. So I made the preparations just like we should all prepare, but while we try and take all the precautions simultaneously, we should be prepared that maybe something else may happen. And the next question, When you did get infected, what was your first reaction? I was already thinking this is going to be inevitable. This was already now in November, so if we go from March, we're already going 8 months since the virus is starting to spread globally. I've had many acquaintances who have had it. I've had close friends who passed away. So why not me? I was quite prepared, and in one sense it seemed like, all right, this was the inevitable. How it happened, I don't know, because of the precautions that we were taking, but it happened. How was the progression of my frame of mind? I just accepted it. And the next question is, was I afraid? It was an unknown. I was stepping into a realm of unknown. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was sort of curious, well, what is going to happen? And of course, you have to remember that in Krishna Valley, we have no electricity. So if we're talking about home medical care, that really restricts certain apparatus that can be used. For instance, someone sent a sort of a machine that helped facilitate breathing. At a certain point, I was having difficulty with breathing, but you have to be able to plug it in. There's nowhere to plug it in. So what's the point? It doesn't work. So those were afraid. There were interesting times, and I was really curious. Well, what direction is all of this going to go in? I got off quite light with the whole scene. I take it as the Lord's mercy. Krishna was very kind. He protected me in very, very difficult situation. And although every member of my team, there was like 5 of us, actually got it, I was the one who had the smallest symptoms. Dizziness, tiredness, I had shortness of breath, my lungs hurt, and so on. But that was basically it. And I had good medical care, which was one of the questions that come up, so I'll come to that. So I really got through it quite well. After 3 weeks, I had more or less recovered. And the symptoms are, say, 90%, 95% gone. Still just weariness. I never lost my taste of smell or my taste, but rather my appetite increased. So, to what extent would you have fought for your health? Would you have gone to a hospital? I would have gone to a hospital. The sort of bottom line was, stay here, especially if it looked like it was going to be terminal. I would have liked to follow my spiritual master, who also was very particular that he didn't want to leave his body in India, and in the hospital, and that was in India. And when that became inevitable, he didn't go to the hospital. It's difficult to say. You know, one picture of struggling with COVID is suffocating to death. That's not a pleasant picture. How I would have dealt with that if I was actually getting into that situation? Well, if it was something that's certainly manageable and treatable. I've been in hospital many times for extended periods of time, unfortunately, so I'm not averse to it. But if it's avoidable, avoid it. I wasn't running there. In fact, no one in Krishna Valley who then actually came down with virus had to go to the hospital. And of course, hospitals didn't really want to have people just knocking on the door as soon as they immediately got the virus, only if symptoms became very, very bad. And for me, thank Krishna, they didn't. But I would have, yes. And what was the course of your typical day during your illness? Well, it depended on the illness, which was, I'd mentioned on a little video that I'd done, vlog, that it was sort of like riding a roller coaster. You never knew what was going to happen. So it was a bit exciting. In that sense, it was quite extraordinary. The symptoms would come, they would go up, they would disappear, something new would come. Usually when you have a flu, you've got some symptoms, like fever, which I didn't have, and then the fever subsides. But it isn't like that with virus. The fever potentially goes down, and then it comes back, and then it goes down, and then it comes back. Or, in my case, dizziness is one symptom. It's there, and then it goes down and disappears. Oh, it's gone. And then the next thing is it's back. And so, like a roller coaster. And I don't like roller coasters. I never liked them when I was a child. And this was like that. So I had to adjust my schedule according to what was actually going on. I don't stay in bed. Even when I'm sick, I don't like being in the bed. But it meant that obviously I was weaker. I had to rise later. It was already November, so I had to be really careful about going outside. Although previously I was always doing power walks just in order to build up my lung health and strength. I was continuing on with my meditation, with my chanting. That wasn't obstructed. Reading was difficult while I had dizziness. After that went, I was reading for 4 or 5 hours a day. I was reading our scriptures. That was really wonderful. And then I was sort of dieting, limitedly dieting. My appetite has really increased since then. What type of medical treatment did you follow? Western, Eastern, and some alternative medicine. Why? Well, I was in the West, so I took Western. Had I been in India, I would have probably been trying Ayurvedic first. But I was in the West, so what was available. But I didn't really have to take any medication per se. I took vitamins and other supplements. Those were really abundant, but the treatment that was provided for me by really a team of first-class doctors, Hungarian, who were in touch with some of my previously well-known, well, even currently well-known doctors in the UK, and they were sort of conferencing nightly with my secretary, and then they would tell me the outcome based on the oximeter, which would say what my oxygen level was, what about my blood pressure, but whatever works. Generally speaking, people have different preferences. If it works for you, then fine. Then use that type of medication. Someone's asking, what was the message of your catching the virus despite preparing to avoid it? Is it the work of karma? Hadn't you interpreted it in your spiritual tradition? Well, I chant Hare Krishna, and a lot of people, for instance, here in Budapest, don't chant Hare Krishna. But when it rains on me as well. So just because I chant Hare Krishna doesn't mean that I don't get wet. So I also get wet. Similarly, I'm also living in the world. You can take this COVID as something like the rain. Why I would get the COVID is a little different than why someone else gets it. And here let me explain a little about the philosophy of karma, which is described in the Bhagavad Gita. which is Krishna's teachings on yoga and philosophy. So we live in a world of action and reaction. Nothing is happening to us by accident. Everything happens as a reaction to the past of what we've done. And of course, we're individuals, we have our own individual story, and that's because we had our own individual past. So when someone catches the virus who's not a believer, who doesn't follow the laws of the Supreme, they are completely under the laws of karma, the laws of action and reaction. On the other hand, those who are believers, those who follow the way of life that's prescribed for us by the Supreme, those people have their karma being directly managed by the Lord. So the Supreme directly manages that karma. Therefore, externally it may appear the same, but actually on a very subtle level, on a higher level, some different things are actually taking place. Saints die, atheists die. Saints may go to one place, atheists go to another. They're both dying, so it's the same phenomena. They may be dying of the same malady, but actually there's a whole different dynamic and a whole different picture behind it. So this good question here, that is this the work of karma? Well, this is the karma of the non-believer, and this we call Krishna karma. This is the karma directly managed by the Lord for our spiritual development. And how does it affect our spiritual development? Well, it reminds us that we're in this world. And in this world, four basic things happen: birth, death, old age, and disease. Doesn't matter who you are, believe in it, don't believe in it, it's happening to you. So this is fact. It's like Bhagavad Gita talks about facts, it doesn't talk about faith. So the fact is that we all get old and we all die, whether we like it or not. You may be a Christian, an atheist, a Jew, a Hindu, a Muslim, everyone gets old. It's happening to everybody. So in our spiritual tradition, this is being managed. The spiritual karma, the Krishna karma, is directly under the control of the Supreme. And in the other case, it's under the control of laws of action and reaction. Here, we're meant to understand that, yes, we're living in this world. Number two is that we have this material body. And along with this body comes all of these inconveniences. And then, how well do we behave? How well do we meditate? How well do we fix our consciousness on the Supreme in times of adversity? When things are going good, it's easy to be very spiritual. But how spiritual are you when you're very difficult? How spiritual are you when you're fighting for your breath? So ultimately, that's what the training of yoga is all about. The training of meditation and self-realization is that even at the point of death, one is able to actually think of the Supreme. And this is sort of a wake-up call. We get a good idea of where we're standing. So it looks the same, but it's different. Okay. Was I praying to recover? No, I didn't want to bother Krishna with that. He already knows what's going on. If he wants me to recover, I'll recover. If he doesn't want me to recover, then I don't. So why twist God's arm? He already knows what's going on. Then faith means that He will do what's best for us materially and spiritually. It's like a father. Does a child have to ask their father, I need this, I need that, make sure that, you know, you give me medicine when I get sick, and make sure that you send me to the right school, and a child doesn't have to tell their father anything. The father, mother automatically provide the best. Similarly, Krishna's already providing the best. Why do I need to tell him what to do? Have I made any changes in my spiritual practices? No, the activities are the same. Chanting, studying, meditation, trying to communicate the message of Bhagavad Gita to others. It was a good wake-up call. I find these health crises is something very good to really put in perspective what I'm actually supposed to be doing here and not get too distracted. So perhaps a little more intensified and a little more serious, because the clock is ticking. One day, I won't recover. And that day could be any day. Someone asks, we understand that many residents of Krishna Valley also got sick. How come Krishna didn't protect them? Well, as I pointed out, he did. He gave them the virus in his own way, and the real protection is that he's always under their care. So that was the special protection that's given, and of course, if one wants to look at it from a material perspective, no one went to the hospital. And in one sense, those who got it are all sort of inoculated for the immediate foreseeable future from perhaps some even more virulent version of COVID. Would you request your community to get vaccinated, the members of the community? I certainly wouldn't tell them not to. Personally, it seems like an inevitability that just recently I saw here in Hungary, there was this article, newspaper article, that if you want to stand in line in a pub for a beer or some wine, you're going to have a certificate, a vaccination certificate. I'm not about to go stand in a line anywhere, in any pub, but it may be inevitable that, especially if things get even worse than they are now, and it looks like they are in many places, and also here in Hungary, although still relatively good, that people are going to have a vaccine if they want to be able to move around in the world. If I want to go back to India, there may be a good chance that I can't get on the plane without one, or I can't get into India without a certificate that I've been vaccinated. So as I mentioned earlier, if it works, will I sprout another 2 arms and so on? I doubt it. Is it good for me? I don't know whether it's good for me, but if it really works, and if this is what I need to continue on with my life and to continue on with my service to Krishna, then I'll accept it, and I'll advise others that they should. When do I think this pandemic will end? I don't know. Some people say it won't end. Some people say this is the new normal. But let me sort of unpackage it in a different way. I've already explained that this is really part of the karmic process. Individuals are suffering their karma globally, the whole world. Now, there's not a country on this planet where this COVID doesn't exist. Everyone is suffering. And why? It's a reaction. To what? To an action. But what kind of action? Not a good action, because it's a bad reaction. If we want good reactions, we have to do the right thing. So we need to, as as 7+ billion people on this planet, wake up to the reality. I'm not going to say we're doing something wrong. I mean, we're doing everything wrong. There isn't something we're doing right. We don't know how to live right. We don't know how to eat right. We don't know how to entertain ourselves right. We don't know how to raise our children. We don't know what the purpose of life is. We don't know who we are. We think we know a lot of things. And we know a lot of things about ignorance, and we know a lot of things about destroying other people and other things, about making a mess out of the planet. So if we become humble enough and come to the understanding that we're doing a lot of things wrong, then perhaps we need to start reflecting on how to actually do things right. Now, if we're doing a lot of things wrong, then it may be that this pandemic is just the first step of a process of other reactions. We'll find out. Time will tell. But don't be surprised if things get bleaker. We already know that the economic situation is going to be a disaster. There is also social unrest as a consequence of everyone being locked down. There's only so much psychological pressure, if even someone doesn't get the virus, that people can handle living locked up in their apartments and working from home. So those themselves have really unforeseen consequences, and the economic consequences of the virus are, it's not a matter of theology, it's a matter of faith. It is a fact. People are suffering, and people are going to be paying for these so-called bailouts that are happening globally for generations to come. So, will life ever go back to normal? It was not normal. Now, maybe, hopefully, we can be normal. But you got to learn what normal is, and normal starts out with knowing who you are. If you don't know who you are, how can you be normal? If you think you're Napoleon, if you think you're Julius Caesar, if you think you're Frankenstein, you're not normal. So similarly, if we think that we're this body, we are not normal. We have to know who we are, which is that we're the soul within this body. What advice would I give to someone who's scared during these times? Know who you are. Know that you're not this body. That COVID will affect your body, but it cannot affect you, the soul within the body. And that's where the root of fear lies. Misunderstanding, ignorance of knowing who we are. No doubt, no one likes to feel pain, no one likes to feel the inconveniences of disease. But once again, one approaches these things with a different consciousness when they are situated in a different type of knowledge. So my advice would be that if you're scared, then read this book. It's called the Bhagavad Gita. This will help you overcome the fear of all the troubled times that we are in and possibly going into. And here was the last question. In general, what was the meaning of your illness, and what is your general message to people regarding the pandemic? I guess this is really summing up and, in one sense, repetition of some of the things that I've said. But we really have to humble ourselves and recognize that we're not as smart as we think. We're not as clever as we think. We're not doing things as well as we think, and what we call progress is actually regress. We're not going forward, we're going back. And that this pandemic is just one part of that message, which is that human beings have to understand that they cannot keep torturing and eating animals without consequences. Many of the viruses, many of the flus, many of the diseases that have actually hit us, not just in this century, but even in the previous century, are related to human beings' proximity to animals, particularly in terms of the way they raise them for slaughter and then they eat them. Stop it. Stop torturing other living entities just in order to become unhealthy. Because it's unhealthy to be a meat-eating diet. So one thing as part of the general message is, and of course this is not a secret, I'm not saying this, it's very clear, everyone knows where this pandemic started, animals that it started with, and wet markets that it started in, and how it spread. Isn't it ABC? That it isn't, that somehow or another you got to dry up the wet markets or you got to be tighter on the, stop it. Just stop this destructive habit, which is destructive to others and it's destructive to ourselves, of eating meat. That would be one message of the meaning of my illness and the meaning of others. I've been a vegetarian for over 50 years. So I'm suffering for the karma because others are doing something. It's raining. I'm also getting wet. But if we stop, in fact, my spiritual master would say that actually if slaughterhouses were shut down, the weather would become very stable, it would become very favorable, and it would stop raining during the day. It would only be raining at night, which means I won't get rained on when you're the one who's supposed to get wet. Hare Krishna.